Hi, good evening, it's John Tierney from Octra, and I'm going to try and record a bit of a talk for the EAA Widening Horizons and relating to the session on post-COVID-19 community archaeology. I am a field archaeologist based here in Ireland, and if I turn the camera around, I'm based in Ardmore in West Waterford, so it's right in the middle of Ireland but down on the south coast. And this is our local historic graveyard, 12th century round tower, cathedral over there, shrine chapel, 8th, 9th, 10th century, here to our right, done up, 18th century. Inside there is the saint's grave, probably an original 5th century grave location for Saint Declan. And the project I'm going to talk about is the Historic Graves project. How do I do this without casting a shadow? If you pause that there and link out, that'll link you to our web platform. And in the web platform, we've been working on this project for 10 years now. And we've worked with about 500, 600 community groups throughout Ireland and also in South Scotland, parts of England, but largely Ireland. And we've done archaeological field surveys of historic graveyards. What you can see here in the background are your typical 19th century round-headed and shouldered headstones. And we have a system that records those and publishes them to the web platform. And the system is very straightforward, and we use the exact same system in very small graveyards or in very big graveyards. And what we do essentially is, with masking tape and a marker, we number every single mortuary monument that we're going to record. And we call them community-led surveys because our approach is that we have a methodology, we have a technical understanding, we have a lot of training, we have a lot of experience, but we're not project leaders. We're equal partners in the projects that we do with community groups. This is, I presume, a 14th century grave slab, and there's about 5 or 6 of them inside in the cathedral, but there's also, if we get the angle right on this, there's initials here. So this 14th century grave slab has been repurposed in the 20th century. The initials there are TT. I was thinking, could it be TF? But it's not, it's definitely TT. So somebody local took that out of the cathedral inside and used it as a grave marker for their family. So they're very rich and they're very living culture, and it's been a fantastic project for us to get involved in. One of the key events that has hit us was the lockdown, or the COVID, the impact of COVID. And I want to talk about in this presentation a little bit of how we're going to approach that. And how our thinking has developed throughout COVID, because we've gone through a number of lockdowns, and what it meant was that we were kind of stuck at home. We weren't able to get out and do field work for spells. But what happened for us last summer is we got back out into the field later in June, and we did a fair bit of work. We were averaging 2 graveyards a week with community groups, right in that, let's say, peak COVID period. And it was a different summer for us because what happened is an older cohort came out into the graveyards with us. Our average age group until COVID-19 was, let's say, mid-50s to late 60s. But what happened last summer is a large contingent were well into their 70s and into their late 70s as well. And I think that's what happened, is the people who were older, more vulnerable before the vaccines came in, felt that they wanted to get out, they wanted to meet their friends. And the graveyard surveys, being that they're outdoors, and we had no indoor components to them at all. We didn't provide toilet facilities, we didn't provide tea making facilities or anything like that. So it was all completely outdoors and masked and social distance as best we could. And we got a great turnout from an older group, and they adopted the project, and they turned up across a 20 square mile area, and did a whole range of different graveyards. But the challenge we had was that the older group, in this particular case, they weren't great at the digital data entry. And that's usually what we do, is we record the headstones in the field, and then the community group sit down and type up the record sheets. But that didn't really happen last year. So in response to COVID, what we did is we actually shortened our record sheet. The record sheet normally has two sides. The front side would be, let's say, genealogy, which is what most communities want to do. They want to engage and record their genealogy. Whereas the back page then is the archaeology, or the measurements and the description of the iconography and all that kind of carry on. Whereas last year we cut it right back to the bare inscription, and even in some cases maybe just getting 2 names and 2 dates off each headstone. So we got a geolocated photograph of every headstone, and we then got some kind of identifier, biographical details from each stone, and that's what we published last summer, by and large. So we were just as active for the later summer, and then we went into another lockdown again. And what happened then is that the powers that be in the National Monument Service and the Heritage Council actually were very successful in accessing funding for heritage projects. So a lot of the contracts we got at the end of last year related to surveys that we had done previously, and that our new contracts were actually for us to do conservation plans and management plans, practical management plans for the graveyards. In the middle of the summer, a neighbour of ours died, and during the funeral, social distance funeral, we were all split out in the graveyard here, and I was standing here and looking at the ground, and I realised I was standing over what's possibly a medieval cross slab, just in that wee little spot in the ground. And it kind of woke us up to some extent that these graveyard floors, if they haven't been hugely altered, are actually a source of important information as well. Not just the physical remains of the mortuary monuments, but also the humps and the hollows that represent graves, and also older stones like this one, mirrored with a stone here, and then another one back in the background. They represent patterns of burial in the graveyards, whereas because we were given time under COVID and with extra funding, we began to actually think about what is the surface of the ground telling us, and we began to finally use the digital data and the digital elevation models that we were getting from the drone surveys. And we're now combining our mortuary monument records with our identifying rows, full rows, half rows, dogleg rows, that kind of the rows of burials in the ground from the shape of the graves, not just from the mortuary monuments. So I'm casting the light here at night time deliberately, because I want to show that as we cast the light on the ground, we can see the shape of the ground better, the microtopography. And we use the same technique when we're reading headstones. We call it going around the clock when we're reading a headstone. We cast oblique light with a torch across the face of a stone, or across particular lettering. If my light will come around. She's unscrewing. Now I'm blinded. So we use torches to read the headstones all the time, and it's oblique light. And then as we move the torch, it allows us to get more detail on each letter, or the problem numbers, and so on. And now we're essentially doing the same thing with the graveyard surface using digital elevation models. Morning. John again. Last night I was in there, heading this direction, and now, just after sunrise in Ardmore, I'm back into the graveyard to finish my talk. The battery on the lamp started flickering, and then it went out. So I had covered 2/3 of what I wanted to say, and for the last couple of minutes there's one main point I want to make in terms of how we propose to deal with conditions post-COVID, communities post-COVID. And I suppose in a way here at this west gable at the cathedral in Ardmore, it's about communication. We want to communicate a message, just like the preceding Christian populations here did. We started a company in '96. Around 2005 then we started publishing all our own excavation reports internally. We built a journal, we put it online, and we posted PDFs to that on a regular basis. And the PDF became our main tool for communicating with the public and with other archaeologists, but I'm not sure how much of the public actually read the reports. Your average excavation report was getting, 20, 30, maybe 100 readers over time. Whereas our new strategy that we're developing now is coming out of another project that we've just started. The project is, is called Incultum. It's a Horizon EU project with multiple partners around Europe. And we're to develop and test techniques and methodologies for communicating archaeology, for increasing the heritage tourism value of archaeology. And the main tool we're using is, we're going to continue to do our surveys with community groups, but the main tool we're going to use is we are going to continue to use data published to the web platform of Historic Graves. We're going to continue building up that data set, but the other main tool we're going to use, instead of PDFs for communication, we're going to use video for communication. We started lockdown trying to develop our own internal capacity for making videos, and we got okay at it, but we're field archaeologists. We're not trained in videography, we're not trained in cameras and all that kind of stuff. And we were just aiming too high, was my feeling. We had set ourselves a target of doing a video a week, and it just wasn't happening because it was too difficult. But what did come out of that push is that instead of aiming to do a video a week, we picked up from a movement that's online, which is a lot of outdoors live streaming. And that's what we're going to do. That's the final message I have as part of this presentation. We're going to live stream, and we are live streaming. I'll put a link in here. We're live streaming some of the key projects that we're working on. It's resulting in maybe 2 videos a week going up. So we're hitting our target, our self-set target of 1 video a week, except we're doing 2. If you have a good 4G connection, then the video goes direct to your YouTube account, and it can engage with an audience immediately. And there's no post-processing required, except maybe minor titling and things like that. So over the next 3 years under Incultum, we're going to be live streaming our archaeological fieldwork in an appropriate manner, in a sensitive manner, carefully with the community groups that we work with. And we believe that will increase our audiences, it will increase our relevance, and it will increase our engagement. Well, do we believe that? We're going to test it, if I put my scientific hat on. So historicgraves.com, we work with communities. The surveys are driven by the communities, and lockdown has given us the capacity to improve our methodologies, to fully understand what we're doing, to get the maximum out of what we're at. Increased funding has also supported that. So we're now doing some quite sophisticated conservation surveys and things like that, and we're enjoying that. But our real preference is for working with communities and communicating with communities, and live streaming is going to be our main tool for that. So we'll see how it goes. We'll be able to report back at some later date. All right, I'll leave it there, Nish. Slán go fóill gach céine.